We were still laughing at something in the dining room when I noticed my phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. I was tempted to let it go. My father was in the middle of a toast, his voice sounding steady and proud, and everyone was lifting their glasses. But when I looked at the screen and saw it was David's private number, a feeling of unease settled in my chest. My husband made it a rule never to call during family events unless it was an absolute emergency. I moved into the quiet hallway away from the celebration. "Hi, love," I whispered, trying to sound casual despite my nerves. His reply came back immediate and tense, without any greeting. "Where are you?" "At Dad's birthday dinner." "Why?" "Take our son and leave right now." The wine glass in my hand felt suddenly heavy. "What? What's going on?" "No time. Just go." And with that, the line went dead. The air seemed to freeze around me. I just stood there for a moment, completely still, looking at the familiar family photographs hanging on the wall. There was Dad in his old uniform, my mother smiling next to him, and our little boy Leo sitting on his lap. Everything in that hallway looked so safe and normal. But David's voice had been filled with a kind of danger I'd learned to recognize from my own years in military intelligence. I knew I had to trust that feeling. I turned back to the dining room, but the laughter sounded different now, almost harsh and out of place. My father's voice rose above the rest. "Sarah, sweetheart, we're about to cut the cake." I managed to force a smile. "I just need to grab something from the car," I lied, reaching down to take Leo's hand. "Come on, buddy." He looked up at me, a little confused, but willing to follow. "Can I bring my truck?" "Of course, just be quick." As we headed for the front door, I saw my mom watching us with a puzzled expression. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Yes," I said, though my heart was pounding so loudly it was hard to hear my own voice. The cool night air felt sharp as we stepped outside. I quickly buckled Leo into his booster seat and then looked back at the house one last time. The windows were glowing with warm light, and I could see the silhouettes of my family moving inside, their laughter carrying into the night. That's when I saw the dark SUV parked 2 houses down. Its windows were tinted and the engine was running just enough to send a trail of white exhaust into the air. My breath hitched. I got into the driver's seat, my fingers trembling slightly. Before starting the car, I checked my mirrors. The SUV didn't move, but its headlights flashed once, like a brief signal. I started the engine, my heart hammering in my chest, and pulled away from the curb, the sound of the party fading behind us. "Mommy, where are we going?" Leo asked. I had to swallow before I could answer. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart." The rearview mirror was just darkness. Still, I drove faster than I normally would. 5 minutes later, at a red light, I reached into the glove box to get a tissue for Leo, and my hand brushed against something else. It was a small flash drive wrapped inside a folded piece of paper. I recognized David's handwriting immediately. "If I can't reach you again, trust no one, not even your father." The words seemed to blur. For a second, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My father, the man who had raised me on principles of honor, loyalty, and service. The light turned green, and a car behind me honked. I pressed the accelerator and kept driving, the note shaking in my hand. I didn't understand what was happening, why David sounded so terrified, or what kind of danger could be waiting outside that warm, familiar house. But I knew this wasn't a drill. A block later, Leo had already fallen asleep, his head resting against the side window. I drove through the quiet Virginia streets, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Then, just as I turned onto the road leading to the highway, a bright flash lit up the entire sky behind me. It was brighter than any fireworks and was followed by a sound louder than thunder. I instinctively slammed on the brakes, staring into the rearview mirror. The sky was glowing a sickening orange, and thick smoke was billowing upward. The sound wave reached me a second later, a deep, rolling explosion that was strong enough to shake the steering wheel in my hands. In that single awful moment, every laugh and every happy memory from the party turned to ash because I knew, without any doubt, that the glow was coming from the direction of my father's house. I tried to say David's name, but no sound came out. Leo stirred in the back, frightened by the noise. I grabbed his hand and whispered, "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But I knew it wasn't. It would never be okay again. The fire behind us lit up the sky for miles. I didn't look back again. My only thought was to get my son as far away from that place as I possibly could. The road ahead of us was empty, the headlights just cutting through the cold night. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the wheel hard just to keep the car straight. David's words kept replaying in my head. Take our son and leave right now. That flat, urgent tone. He had never sounded scared before, not even during his deployments. Mom, what was that noise? Leo mumbled from the back seat, rubbing his eyes. I forced my voice to stay calm. Son, just some fireworks, sweetheart. We're going on a little trip. He nodded, trusting me completely, and leaned his head against the window again. I turned onto Route 29, just heading south without any real destination, only knowing that I couldn't stop. At the next gas station, I pulled over near the pumps but left the engine running. I needed a moment to think. The folded note was on the passenger seat, and its words felt like they were burning right through the paper. Trust no one, not even your father. I opened it again, reading it under the dim dashboard light. The handwriting was definitely David's, sharp, deliberate, and written with the same black pen he always used for his classified reports. I'd seen that same writing on mission logs and debriefing files. Not even your father. It just didn't make any sense. My father was a retired Marine colonel, a man who ironed his shirts at 5 in the morning and always stood for the flag, even if it was just on television in his own living room. He ran veterans programs and helped local charities. How could I possibly not trust him? I stared out the windshield, the low hum of the car's engine filling the silence. Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Sarah, a voice whispered. It's Chris, your father's aide. Chris, what is happening? Don't go home, he interrupted. Don't answer any calls from anyone claiming to be from the base. Just stay off the grid. Chris, what are you talking about? My father... Static suddenly overwhelmed the line, cutting him off. Then it went silent. I slowly lowered the phone, my pulse thudding in my ears. Something much bigger was happening, something that went far beyond just family secrets. I reached for the flash drive again. It was small and looked harmless, but I knew David didn't hide things unless there was a very good reason. I remembered when we were first stationed in Norfolk, he used to joke, if you ever find a flash drive hidden in the car, honey, it means I've really messed up. I had laughed about it back then. Now, the memory felt like a terrible omen. I drove for another hour before I stopped at a cheap roadside motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign and a noisy soda machine out front. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 60s, barely glanced up from her crossword puzzle when I paid in cash. Just one night, I said. Once in the room, I locked the door twice and wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. Leo was already half asleep. I tucked him into the bed, brushed the hair off his forehead, and whispered, It's okay, baby. Mom's here. He just smiled faintly and drifted off. I sat down at the small desk with my laptop. For a minute, I hesitated. Plugging in that flash drive felt like crossing a line I could never come back from, but I couldn't reach David. His phone was still going straight to voicemail. I inserted the drive. At first, nothing happened. It just looked like an empty folder. Then, after a few seconds, a single document appeared titled, Read Me When Safe. I clicked it open. Inside were a set of coordinates, a date, December 12th, and one more sentence. If I don't come home, tell our son the truth. I checked the date on my phone. It was December 11th. My throat felt tight. Outside the window, a car drove slowly through the parking lot. I quickly turned off the lights. The silhouette of a man got out, checked something under his car's hood, and then drove away. It was probably nothing, but maybe it wasn't. I closed the laptop, my heart racing. Whatever David was involved in was serious enough to make him disappear and to warn me against my own father. The next morning, I learned about the explosion from the motel's small television. A news anchor reported, a sudden gas leak is believed to have caused a fire at the home of retired Marine Colonel Arthur Miller in Fairfax County. Officials report 1 injured and no fatalities. 1 injured. That had to be my dad. I had an overwhelming urge to call the hospital to go to him, but the echo of David's warning stopped me. Trust no one. Instead, I packed our bag at dawn. Leo slept in the back seat as I started the engine again. Before pulling out, I took one last look at the motel in my rearview mirror. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the windows gold. It looked like any normal morning, but normal had disappeared the moment my phone rang. As we merged back onto the highway, I whispered into the quiet car, "David, wherever you are, I'm going to find the truth." I couldn't run forever. Not from this, not from him. By the time the morning news replayed the footage, I was in a diner off the interstate, staring at a paper cup of coffee I couldn't drink. The reporter's voice was steady over the TV mounted in the corner. Authorities say the explosion originated near the water heater. The home belonged to retired Marine Colonel Arthur Miller. My father's name, said so casually on national television. He was taken to Fairfax General Hospital with minor injuries. Sources confirmed no one else was hurt. The waitress came by to top off my coffee. "Crazy world," she said quietly, glancing at the screen. "Poor man, I heard he's a veteran." I just nodded, unable to find my voice. Leo sat beside me, picking at a pancake, completely unaware. The smell of bacon and syrup made the situation feel surreal. I paid in cash, left a tip, and went back to the car. My hands were shaking as I buckled Leo in. The air felt colder. Dad was alive, but David was still gone. At a red light, I tried David's number again, and again it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried the contact listed as CIA Liaison Langley, a number David had told me to call only in a true emergency. A woman's voice answered. "This is Agent Thorne." "Agent Thorne, this is Sarah Miller, David's wife. He called me last night. There was an explosion at my father's house." "Mrs. Miller," she said coolly, "I'm afraid I can't confirm or deny your husband's current assignment." "This isn't about his assignment. He said we were in danger." There was a brief silence. "I'll log your concern. If your husband makes contact, inform us immediately." The line went dead. For the first time since this started, I cried, not just from fear, but from the sudden, heavy realization that I was completely on my own. By noon, I had checked into another motel, 2 towns over. While Leo watched cartoons, I sat on the bed, scrolling through every online news. Report about the fire. The official story was thin: a gas leak, contained quickly, minor property damage. But the photographs that people had posted told a different story. The windows were blown outward, and the roof was charred black. That was not a gas leak. It was a detonation. I read the captions over and over until one detail made me freeze. Investigators on scene declined to comment on the presence of unmarked vehicles near the property. Unmarked vehicles. That black SUV. My mind went back to that night, the exhaust in the dark, the headlights flickering. I shut the laptop and reached for the flash drive again. There had to be something else on it, something I had missed. I plugged it back into my laptop, opened the empty-looking folder, and typed in the command to show hidden files. 2 new files appeared. One was labeled Project Aegis, and the other was a contact list. I opened the first file. It was a large spreadsheet filled with coordinates, timestamps, and large dollar figures, all detailing offshore transfers through various shell companies. One column was labeled Miller Solutions, my father's firm. I felt my stomach clench. The contact list was even worse. It contained several names of contractors and officers I recognized from my dad's retirement parties, men he had mentored and respected. Next to some of those names, David had typed a single word in red: compromised. I just stared at the screen until the letters started to blur. Was David investigating my dad, or was he being set up? That night, while Leo slept, I scrolled through old messages between David and me. The last text he had sent before this all began was 2 weeks ago. "Dinner at 6. Don't wait up if I'm late." It was so simple and ordinary, but now it felt like a message from a ghost. A soft knock on the motel room door made me jump. I peered through the curtain. A man in a brown delivery uniform was standing outside, holding a small padded envelope. "Package for Sarah Miller." I didn't order anything. "It's prepaid," he said, setting it on the ground by the door. "From Arlington." I waited until he was gone before I opened the door. The envelope held a single key and a typed note. Locker 47. Arlington Storage. Thursday, 6 a.m. My breath caught. It was David's style, this time printed, not handwritten. I recognized the way he always capitalized the A with a slight left slant. Thursday was tomorrow. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the hum of the air conditioner. Leo turned over in his sleep, mumbling about his toy truck. Tomorrow, locker 47. But another thought crept into my mind. How did that package find me here? I hadn't used my real name when I checked in. Someone knew where I was. I stayed awake until dawn, every little sound from the motel setting my nerves on edge. Before leaving, I checked the parking lot from the window. No SUV, no movement. At 5:30 a.m., I loaded the car, my heart pounding. Leo stirred as I started the engine. "Where are we going, Mom?" "Just somewhere Daddy told us to go," I said softly. He yawned, trusting me completely. As the sun rose over the quiet highway, I glanced at the key in the cup holder. Locker 47. Whatever was waiting for me there would either save us or be the end of everything. The drive to Arlington took less than 2 hours, but it felt like I was crossing into another world. The rising sun washed the road in gold, but I barely noticed it. My thoughts were churning. David, my dad, the explosion, the flash drive. Every mile pulled me deeper into a mystery I had never asked to be a part of. By the time we reached the storage facility, Leo was asleep again in the back. The lot was almost empty. I parked near the far end, put the locker key in my pocket, and took a deep breath. The morning air was crisp. I could smell old dust and oil from the long rows of metal doors. Locker 47 was in the center aisle. My palms were damp as I slid the key into the lock. It clicked open easily. Inside, there was a small, plain duffel bag and a manila envelope taped to the back wall. The envelope had block letters written on it. "If you found this, you're already in danger." My breath hitched. I tore it open. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. My father shaking hands with men I didn't recognize, sitting at conference tables, stepping out of black sedans. One picture showed him at a marina in Norfolk with a man David had once described as a defense contractor who had been flagged by an internal audit. Another photograph showed something worse, me, holding Leo at a county fair, smiling with a red circle drawn around my head. My knees felt weak. I sank onto the cold concrete floor, my heart hammering. David must have taken these, or had them taken. But why would he circle me? Then I saw the flash drive taped to the back of the envelope. It was different from the first one, smaller and older. I plugged it into my laptop right there on the floor. A single folder appeared. Aegis Recordings. The first audio file started with static. Then, a familiar voice came through. David's, low and steady. "If you're hearing this, Sarah, I didn't make it out. The truth is bigger than either of us. Your father's company, Miller Solutions, has been used as a front for transferring experimental weapons data to private buyers overseas. He doesn't know the full scope, but he's being used by men he trusts. I tried to stop it, but someone inside Langley burned my cover." "I'm sorry." I pressed pause, trembling. My father, a traitor? No, it was impossible. But David's tone wasn't paranoid. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. I hit play again. "You'll find proof in the offshore ledgers under Project Aegis. It's all there. If you can take it to Internal Affairs, ask for Agent Thorne. She's clean. But be careful, Sarah. Someone close to you already knows you're on the move. If it's not me at the door, don't open it." The recording ended. I sat there for a long time, finding it hard to breathe. The early light filtered through the cracks of the door, dust floating in the air. It couldn't be true. My father had served this country for 40 years. He had lost friends in combat. He wasn't capable of this. And yet, some part of me knew David wouldn't lie about something like this. I drove to a quiet park a few miles away to think. Leo ran to the playground, laughing in the cold morning air. I watched him, and a strange sense of calm settled over me. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. It was about survival and about what kind of world he would grow up in. I replayed David's words, "Someone close to you already knows you're on the move." That evening, I parked outside the hospital. I needed to see my father, to look him in the eye. If there was any truth to this, I would see it in his face. Inside, the smell of antiseptic was sharp. I followed the signs to room 214. Dad was lying propped up against white pillows, a bandage on his arm and bruises on his jaw. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice hoarse. Thank God you're safe. I heard you left right before the fire. I hesitated in the doorway. Yeah, I don't even know how to explain. You don't have to, he said, reaching for my hand. Yafa says, it was an accident, a gas leak in the basement. The investigators already cleared it. I looked at him closely. There was no sign of guilt, just exhaustion. Yet something in me remained guarded. Dad, I said quietly, did you ever work with a company called Apex Maritime? His grip on my hand tightened. Where did you hear that name? I froze. His eyes had changed. They were sharp and alert, just like the colonel I remembered from my childhood. It's classified, he said finally. Sarah, some things are better left alone. You hear me? Then why did David call me last night? I asked. He frowned. David? He's not... Sarah, there's something you need to know about your husband. The CIA's been investigating him for months. He's under suspicion for leaking information to private defense firms. Information that could... our national contracts. I froze. You're saying David's the traitor? I'm saying he's dangerous, Dad replied firmly. Hey, he dragged you into something you don't understand. If he's feeding you lies about me, it's because he needs leverage. His words stung, but something about them felt rehearsed, like a line he'd practiced. Then why did someone try to kill you? I asked. If you're clean, why the fire? His jaw tightened. I don't know what he's told you, but I've spent my life protecting this country. You think I'd betray it for money? I don't know what to think anymore, I whispered. We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he said quietly, I know you love him, Sarah, but love doesn't make a man innocent. It blinds you. I met his eyes. And what about loyalty, Dad? Doesn't that blind you too? He looked away first. Before I could say more, my phone vibrated. Text message from an unknown number. If you want the truth, come alone. 7:00 a.m. tomorrow, Arlington Underpass. No name, no signature. I looked at Dad. Do you know anyone who'd send this? He shook his head slowly. Don't go, Sarah. Whoever that is, they're playing you. Like David played me? I asked, bitterness slipping out. His face softened. You're my daughter. You think I'd ever lie to you? But he already had, I realized. Maybe not directly, but by omission. I want to believe you, I said, my voice breaking. But nothing adds up. Dad sighed. Just promise me you'll stay with family. Let the agency handle it. I can't, I said, standing. I have to see this through. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. Sarah, if you go down this road, you might not come back the same. I looked over my shoulder. Neither did you, Dad. Out in the parking lot, the rain had begun to fall. I sat in the car for a while, watching it blur the windshield. My heart ached, knowing both men I loved might be on opposite sides of something that could destroy us all. I left before dawn, the highway empty except for long-haul trucks. Leo slept under a blanket in the back. I parked 2 blocks from the Arlington Underpass in a church lot, tucked the seats back, and waited. The December air was cold as I crossed the street. The light under the bridge was gray and thin. I did what David had taught me, walk past, check reflections, loop back. I saw 2 cars idling at the curb. One was the same sedan from the hospital. The other, a dented car, felt like camouflage. I stopped halfway beneath the overpass. The air smelled like wet concrete. A man stepped out from the shadows of a column. He kept his hands visible. Sarah, he said carefully. It was Chris, my father's aide. The voice from the phone. Don't come any closer, I said. Show me your phone. He held it up. I shouldn't have texted. They're reading more than we think. Who is they? People you don't want to name, he said, glancing at the idling cars. You have the Aegis files. The name hit the air. What do you know about Aegis? Enough, he said. Miller Solutions books started showing fees routed through shell companies. The dollar amounts didn't match. Then there were meetings I wasn't briefed on. Your father thought they were just donors for the Veterans Fund. He didn't see the rest. What rest? Hardware specs, naval prototypes, he swallowed. Sarah, your father isn't the one selling anything. He's the one they're using to make it look legitimate. Why call me? Because you'll do what the agency won't, he said. And because David asked me to. My heart jumped. You've seen him? Chris shook his head. He slipped me this before he vanished. From his jacket, he pulled a battered green notebook, a standard-issue field journal. He said, if I don't come back, she'll find what I couldn't carry. He held it out. I didn't move. Set it down. He placed it near the column. As he stood up, I heard a car door click open. One of the drivers got out, pretending to argue on his phone. They're early, Chris whispered. What's in there? I asked, sliding the notebook into my bag. Names, times, a meeting at the Apex Maritime Marina in Norfolk with a buyer labeled Vance. The name rang a bell. Martin Vance, my father's business partner for 6 years, the man who came over for Christmas. He's the one, I whispered. He's the bridge, at least, Chris said. He masks his transfers through the veteran scholarship pipeline. It's ugly, but elegant. A third man slipped under the overpass, his jacket too light for the weather, hands deep in his pockets. And the explosion? I asked. They wanted your father rattled and isolated, Chris said. They wanted you to run, and they wanted you to call David so they could triangulate him. A train rattled overhead. What do you want me to do? I asked when it passed. Take the notebook to Internal Affairs, ask for Agent Thorne. She's clean, and if you can, bring your father in on it. Give him one more chance to be the man who raised you. A shout came from across the underpass. Hands! The man in the light jacket stepped forward, flashing a badge. Arlington PD. Chris didn't flinch. No, you're not, he said softly. That precinct's patch is different. The man's fake smile died. Run, Chris said. I didn't argue. I turned and ran toward the stairwell, footsteps hammered behind me. Chris shoved me toward the stairs, and I took them 2 at a time. At the top, I cut left, slipped between 2 parked cars, and crossed against the light, disappearing into a crowd of office workers. By the time I got back to my car, my hands were shaking. Leo stirred. We're okay, Mom, I said, trying to believe it. In the rearview mirror, I saw Chris step out with his hands up, buying me time. I lost sight of them as I turned the corner. On the ramp to the highway, I called the Langley liaison again. Agent Thorne, I said when she answered, I have David Miller's field journal and documentation on Project Aegis. If you want it, meet me where a colonel would feel safe. A pause. Where? St. Luke's Chapel, Fort Myer, at noon. Who will be there? My father, I said. And if you're clean, you will be too. I hung up and exhaled. The plan formed: a chapel, my father, and his partner Vance, who liked to stay in the shadows. If we were going to fix this, we'd do it in the light. Fort Myer had always been a place of ceremony with its white walls and iron gates. When I drove through the chapel gates, my heart was thudding. Dad was already there, sitting in the front pew, wearing his old dress coat over the hospital sling. He looked older. Sarah, he said, standing slowly. You came. I had to. I sat Leo in the back pew with a coloring book and met Dad in the aisle. Before I could speak, a woman in a gray suit entered from a side door. Agent Thorne, she said. Internal Affairs. Dad's jaw tightens. You brought the agency here. I brought the truth here, I said. Thorne gave a polite nod. Colonel Miller, we need a few clarifications about your consultancy, specifically your relationship with Mr. Martin Vance. The color drained from Dad's face. Martin is a friend. What is this? She opened a folder. We believe Mr. Vance is the primary conduit in an arms diversion scheme linked to Project Aegis. We also believe you were used to validate fraudulent contracts. Dad looked stunned. That's insane. I stepped closer. Dad, Chris told me everything, and I have David's field notes. David, his voice cracked. You're still trusting that man. He was right, Dad. About Vance, about the shell companies, about the explosion. He was right about all of it. He just shook his head, refusing to believe it. You don't understand. Martin saved my command. Agent Thorne interrupted. If you truly believe that, I'd advise you to call him. Invite him here. He looked between us, his hand trembling as he got his phone. Fine as, he muttered. He dialed. It went to voicemail. He tried again, and again. Thorne spoke softly. That's strange. We've had his phone on trace since last night. What do you mean, trace? Dad asked sharply. The chapel door opened. 2 men in suits walked in, and between them was Martin Vance. He had the calm confidence of a man used to boardrooms. Arthur, he said warmly, you look well, considering. Dad's expression was a mixture of relief and confusion. Martin? What's going on? Why are they saying... Vance's gaze flicked to me, then to Thorne. You shouldn't have brought her into this, Artie. Thorne took a step forward. Mr. Vance, you're under investigation for treason and illegal trafficking of restricted military data. He laughed softly. You think you can just... Before he could finish, the chapel's rear door swung open. 2 uniformed MPs stepped inside, followed by a tall figure in civilian clothes. His arm was in a sling, but his beard was trimmed. My breath caught. David. He met my eyes and gave a small, weary smile. Hey, Sarah. Dad turned, speechless. David stepped forward. I told you I'd find proof, sir, and I did. He placed a small USB drive on the pew. Everything you signed, every file Vance used, cross-referenced with the veterans' charity accounts. You were set up. Vance's composure finally broke. You don't know what you're talking about. Those files are... Not anymore, Agent Thorne said, motioning to the MPs. Take him. The cuffs clicked shut. Dad stood frozen as they led Vance out. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. I didn't know, he whispered. God help me, I didn't know. David stepped closer. You weren't supposed to. That's how they operate. For a long time, none of us spoke. The chapel was quiet except for the sound of Leo coloring in the back. Finally, Dad straightened his shoulders. You saved my daughter, he said to David, and my name. He paused, his voice thick. I misjudged you. I assume, judged you. Eyes softened. You were just protecting her the only way you knew how, sir. I respect that. Dad extended his good hand. They shook, 2 soldiers from different eras, bound by the same code. When the MPs and the Agent Thorne left, the chapel was still again. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows. Dad turned to me. Sarah, I'm so sorry for doubting you, for all of this. I felt tears that I hadn't realized I was holding back. Just tell me we're done with hiding things, Dad. He nodded slowly. We are. David reached for my hand, his grip warm and steady. It's over, Sarah. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in days, the tightness in my chest eased. We had survived secrets, fire, and fear. Now we had to heal what was left. Outside the chapel, the noon bells began to ring. The sound was clear and bright. We left the chapel together, the 3 of us walking side by side into the December air. Leo ran ahead, chasing pigeons in the courtyard. For the first time in days, I let myself just breathe. The storm was over. David was still moving stiffly from the injury that had kept him hidden, but his eyes were sharp again. He reached for my hand as we walked. I kept thinking you'd hate me, he said quietly, for dragging you into this. I looked up at him. You didn't drag me in, David. You pulled me out. He smiled, a small but real smile. We drove to the harbor in Norfolk that afternoon. The water was calm, the winter sun glinting off the ships. That place had always been special to us. It was where he proposed before his first deployment, and the same dock where I waited for him to come home. Dad sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the water. You know, he said after a while. I spent half my life preaching about vigilance. I never imagined it would be my own friend I should have been watching. David answered softly. Sometimes the enemy doesn't wear a different flag, sir. Sometimes he just wears your trust. Dad nodded. We parked near the end of the pier. The cold air bit through my jacket as I got out, but it felt grounding. Dad stayed in the car with Leo while David and I walked to the railing. What happens now? I asked. Internal affairs will wrap this up, David said. Vance is facing federal charges. Your father's name will be officially cleared. And you? He gave a half smile. I'll get my clearance back. After that, maybe I'll be done. I'm tired of seeing the worst in people, Sarah. I understood that feeling. Do you ever think about what normal would even look like? Normal is probably a myth, he said. But peace, I could get used to peace. We stood there for a moment, just listening to the sea and the gulls. Dad joined us after a while, holding Leo's hand. His face was pale, but his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. I just talked to Thorne, he said. They're releasing the official statement tomorrow. They're calling me a whistleblower. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Guess it's never too late to learn humility. David extended his hand. It's an honor to serve with a man who still stands up when it matters. Dad gripped his hand firmly. You brought my daughter home. That's honor enough. The four of us stood together by the railing. Leo leaned against my leg. Mom, can I feed the birds? I handed him the crust from a sandwich. He laughed as the gulls swooped down. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled without having to force it. A month passed before the world started to feel steady again. The investigation ended quietly. Martin Vance pleaded guilty to several counts, cutting a deal. The agency cleared Dad of all wrongdoing, calling him an unwitting participant. I knew those words would bother him for a long time. He stopped wearing his service medals for a while, saying they felt heavier than they used to. But every morning he still raised the flag in his front yard, slow and precise, because he knew honor wasn't about having a perfect record. David recovered quickly. The agency offered him a desk job for his own safety, but he declined. I've had enough of walls and locked rooms, he told me. Instead, he started consulting for veterans' mental health programs. As for me, I went back to teaching part-time at the community college, writing lectures on ethics and intelligence. Life was still fragile, but it felt real again. One Saturday, Dad called, his voice lighter than I'd heard it in months. Come over for lunch, Sarah. Just a family this time. No explosions, no agents. When we arrived, the house smelled like fried chicken. Leo ran straight to the backyard. Dad poured a sweet tea and smiled. Feels like the old days, he said. Better, I answered. Because now we know how close we came to losing it. He nodded. You know, when David first called you that night, I thought he was tearing our family apart. Turns out he was the only one holding it together. I think he'd say the same about you, I said. Later, David joined us on the porch. The sun was setting, painting everything in a golden light. My father dozed in his chair, and Leo had fallen asleep on his lap. For a long time, we just sat in the quiet. David took my hand. You ever think about how it all started? He asked. Just one phone call. I think about it every day, I said. It was the worst sound I've ever heard, and the best thing that ever happened to us. He smiled. It's funny how those can be the same thing. I rested my head on his shoulder. Maybe that's what life is. Just learning which sounds to run from and which ones to run toward. He squeezed my hand. You always ran toward the right ones, Sarah. I wasn't sure if that was true. I'd made mistakes and doubted the wrong people, but maybe that's what redemption really is. Not erasing the past, just learning to live with its echo. The porch light flickered on. The flag in Dad's yard stirred in the breeze. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies, the fire, the fear, and what it had given us back. We had faced the silence that almost broke us and come out stronger. When the first stars appeared, I turned to David and whispered, You know, when all this started, I thought we were running for our lives. He smiled. We were. But maybe, I said, watching my father and son breathe in rhythm, we were really just running back to them. He kissed my forehead. That's the only mission worth finishing. We sat there until the crickets outnumbered our words. The next morning, I watched Dad from the kitchen window as he raised the flag again. His movements were slower now, but deliberate. When he saluted, the gesture was more than muscle memory. It was gratitude. I opened the window and let the morning air in. Somewhere behind me, David poured coffee and turned on the radio. The news anchor was talking about peace negotiations, but for once, the words didn't sound distant. They sounded possible. I carried my mug out to the porch and looked up at the flag rippling in the sunlight. It didn't feel like ceremony anymore. It felt like healing.